So, welcome everybody to the first joint Substack live uh, between my efforts and Mariel's efforts, the Golden State Report and the So Does It Matter website on California politics. So, two Golden State reports, really. I think before we kick off, because this is going to get sent out to not only everybody on the So Does It Matter subscription list, but Mariel will be able to send out the finished video to everybody on her list. Why don't we start with some introductions? Why don't you go first, Mariel, and why don't you tell people that are watching something about yourself? But make
Oh,
sure you include something that nobody knows.
I'm not sure there is anything nobody knows. I'm not very good at keeping secrets.
All right.
I have been a member of an editorial board for just about 20 years, up until a year and a half ago. I worked for the LA Daily News, the Los Angeles News Group, which is the precursor to the Southern California News Group, which owns like all the newspapers except for the LA Times in Southern California, the Sacramento Bee, and then the Los Angeles Times. So I have been opinionating about Los Angeles and California for a long time. About 6 months ago, with some former LA Times colleagues, started Golden State Report in Golden State um, in an effort to reinvigorate public debate about important issues and ideas about Los Angeles and California.
There we go. And for those people who are on the other side, those people that are watching this who are subscribers to the Golden State Reports and the fans of Mariel. My name's John Fleischman, and I am a longtime conservative voice in California. The only editorial board I've ever been on is my own. I published the Flash Report website on California politics for a quarter century, which seems like a very long time. I finished doing that at the end of last year as I wanted to transition to something that allowed me to spend more time writing and less time editing. And so what you get is sodoesitmatter.com, which is a Substack devoted to California politics. And I would say this about myself, and I think people that follow me would agree with this. I guess if I had a byline, it would be like this: fair and biased, right? Which is to say, I have my own definite opinions about the way I think things should be. And, I cheer when people I like win, and I'm unhappy when the people I like don't win. And I don't try to be like an independent observer. However, I'm very focused on calling balls and strikes. Just because I have someone that I want to have win or lose doesn't mean that I'm biased in the way that I'm unbalanced in the way that I cover that person. This quality about me attracts some people who are like, you know what, it's really refreshing to have that going on. And then there's other people that are like, when I want to say, hey, there could be voter fraud in Los Angeles, but somebody better prove it to me. Right. And then other people are like, no, 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 no. The president says there's fraud. So the default is there's fraud until you prove there's not. And I'm like, well, no, it doesn't work that way in this country. Anyways, I don't want to foreshadow any of our conversation. So um, I think that this is going to pretty much this first session between Mariel and I is going to be all election day related. And I'm going to throw out there that I think we're going to probably dive into the mayor's race first, because I think that's the most interesting here in Mariel, I think, is in Los Angeles. I
I
was
am.
and
I'm
I
a
was born
voter.
and I was born and raised in Los Angeles, but escaped to Orange County. And then I think we'll probably touch on just some other highlights of interesting things going on. I know that I want to hit on the governor's race.
Oh,
I'd
yeah.
like to I'd like to have a little conversation about Prop 14 and the top two system. I know that you recently had Steve Maviglio on a separate podcast, which I'll link below, which I think, it was interesting. Steve's a Democrat, and he and I barnstormed the state in 2010, campaigning as a right and left duo about why Prop 14 was a bad idea at the time. So we've been at this for a long time. Anyway, so let's kind of jump into it, and I'm going to throw it to you, Mariel. Something happened over the weekend
Did
in
it?
the LA mayor's race. What happened, and why do you think it happened?
What happened? Well, I'll get to the details, but first of all, let me say that it was not unexpected. On election night, the results were Karen Bass in number one place, Spencer Pratt, the Republican reality TV star, and the number two spot, Nithya Raman in number three. On Saturday, Nithya and Spencer Pratt traded places. And that many people predicted this because the way um, counting works in Los Angeles, and we all know, we've all heard of how long it takes. It's because they're really careful and they're verifying signatures and they're sending things back with weird signatures or they're contacting voters. Anyway, it's a whole thing. But traditionally, the late ballots are more, I don't know, progressive, left. I mean, these are liberals. And so of course we're going to see more votes for Nithya and other Democrats in the race. Now I say it was not at all surprising because we've seen that before. When Eunesis won CD1, this is the district which includes MacArthur Park, which there's been a lot of discussion about. She beat the incumbent Gil Cedillo, and it didn't happen for 2 weeks. And that again is just because of the way people vote on their mail-in
Right.
ballots in Los Angeles. So there we are. It is.
Yeah, my recollection is that Nithya Raman herself didn't win on election night when she was challenging an incumbent, and
Yes,
she actually won with late votes herself last time. Like,
yes,
this is a pattern.
it is. It is a pattern. It's
So,
a pattern across the state. It's a pattern in Los Angeles. It's just it is the way it is.
right.
Historically, it's happened a lot, and
And
every time there's a lot of charges of fraud, and I mean, I just think if there's gonna be fraud, wouldn't it happen in a different way? Wouldn't you do it before? It
right.
just
I
seems like
well,
a
and I
really
think
inefficient way to be fraudulent, right?
I think the some of the critiques, and we could talk about it, of the system and the way that it's set up is that if there was fraud, you would never know,
Yeah,
right? Because you've got a live ballot that's being mailed out to every single household, and what are the mechanics of making sure that somebody's not going to the household of that guy that's on vacation, opening their mail, filling out and mailing it, you'd never know. But,
exactly.
I would add this, a number of us have been watching intently election returns, since the balloting started and more since the voting started by mail, right? Because all this stuff is trackable, and I'm on the phone with people like Cole Patterson on the GOP side, Paul Mitchell on the Democrat side, Rob Pyers, kind of watching and tracking all this data. And one of the phenomena that we saw was that this election cycle, more so than others, we saw traditionally late voting Republicans tending to vote early because I think they had some surety about the governor's race and really wanted to make. They got excited about all these ideas that maybe if there's enough GOP votes, Democrats could get locked out, right? And then we saw the opposite happening. And it's all relative. We're not talking about most of these people, but we saw a lot of Democrats who always vote right when they get their ballot. We saw a drop off. Paul Mitchell was the first one to point this out, where they were waiting, and it was for the opposite, which was they were afraid, I think, collectively, these people, that the GOP could do a lockout, and they wanted to make sure that they knew which Democrat to vote for to make sure they were advancing the right one. And so you get it, and then again, we could talk about, and we will talk about
Well,
Prop
it wasn't only
14.
about the lockout. It was also because the one of the candidates, the leading candidate in late March, Eric Swalwell, not Republican, excuse me, a representative in the House, flamed out, and the party establishment had already started coalescing around him, and so it freaked people out a lot. Because imagine you'd already cast your vote for him, and a lot of people apparently did miss that part because they did vote for him. But I think that I heard from a lot of people that was like, I don't even know who to vote for now. Um,
Yeah, there's about 25,000 people in California who cast a ballot so far for Eric Swalwell, and while I suspect some percentage of them are really strange people who voted for him because they thought this is my way of giving the middle finger to the system. I'll vote for the most of those are going to be very early voted people who cast a ballot right away, right before things kind of exploded or before they heard about it. I would say this as well. You know, in in Los Angeles, and I say this to my conservative friends, but it's applicable to everybody who's watching this program. There's a tendency that people have to have kind of affirmation by the group that you hang out with.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm in Orange County, and all the time I hear, "I don't understand how California could be a Democratic state. Everyone I know is Republican." And then I'll go up into Los Angeles, and I'll give a talk, and I'll have somebody come up to me and go, "It was really interesting to hear from you. You may be the first Republican I've ever met." And it's kind of this big reminder that California is a huge place, and a reminder to my friends who are not in LA County that, LA County voter registration for Republicans is somewhere around 16%, 17%, right in there. And so when the dust settles, there's only so much bandwidth for a Republican candidate. And I do think there was a big question that had come up because Spencer Pratt's candidacy was unique. And it was unique in that it was really kind of this social media phenomena between the top quality viral AI created videos that he created. And then it almost spawned like massive content creation by other people. And frankly, the videos were interesting. They were engrossing. They were fun. I think Pratt's candidacy has caused the mayor to have to confront a lot of issues that in a normal campaign she would not. But
Agree.
then when you get to this question of does social media um, popularity equate to political votes? Well, I think we got an answer, right? Which is that no, it means that
Or
everyone,
not enough
every
votes.
not
I mean,
enough
it is
votes, but
remarkable that he, a Republican, in Los Angeles, who has no experience, did as well as he did, frankly.
yes,
And I think that may be because he was out there on social media, and he created excitement in a race that is typically not very exciting, and also tapped into a lot of frustration that people are feeling. I mean,
well,
it's real.
speaking of which, maybe you could tell me, Mariel, because you'll have a good beat on this. Um, when we look at the outcomes right now in the mayor's race, it's hard to not ignore the fact that almost 2/3 of Angelinos who have cast their ballots cast it for someone not Mayor Bass. So why is that? Why is she having she in problems as the incumbent mayor of the city?
Because she hasn't done a very good job.
All right.
I mean, that's it. The city is, frankly, um, in very dysfunctional right now. City government, I'm talking about. I mean, it's not quite the hellhole that you might have seen in the Spencer Pratt videos, but this is a very wealthy city, and it should be better run than it is. I mean, I'm just talking about basic stuff that we can't, keep the streets paved, that I mean, trash is everywhere. It's just disgusting. And we're surrounded by these cities that are also very liberal cities run by liberals, but they work well. They're focusing on the basics. Is just fallen apart in the city. And I've been living in the city for, well, almost a quarter century, and I have seen it. I've seen it deteriorate, and people feel it. Also, it's the homelessness issue. That was Karen Bass said, "I'm going to fix this. This is a problem." And there's only been incremental change, and it's like compassion fatigue. We see the distress out on the streets. We see the people raving and ranting down Sunset Boulevard and Ventura Boulevard and Santa Monica Boulevard, and it's time for somebody to deal with this in a very real way.
Well, in which case, this will be an interesting moment for a mayor's race in Los Angeles because I don't know that Spencer Pratt was doing a much better job, I think, in identifying the problems and kind of connecting with people at that level. I have my frustrations. You have your frustrations. We're all frustrated. Let's do something about it. I don't know that Spencer's campaign was long on the exactly specifically what to do about it, the solution side. But I'm not sure that Nithya Raman really, she does not have executive experience, right? Although neither did Mamdani in New York, and he's now the mayor there, which is kind of the model. I keep wondering. It's not the same. Of course, he beat a Democrat. I mean, he beat a Republican. And this is an interesting phenomenon in Los Angeles where now we have a runoff. I don't know that I could think of an analogous situation in Los Angeles where the incumbent mayor has been forced into a runoff by someone to their, in this case, left, right? And it's an interesting.
Vinton, Antonio Villaraigosa,
Oh, okay. All right. So this has happened before.
2005.
Um, yeah, although was Villaraigosa really, so Villaraigosa was the mayor.
No, no, no.
No,
James
Han was
Hahn
the
was
mayor.
the mayor.
So did Villaraigosa
Son
didn't
son
really
of
run
Kenneth
from his,
Hahn. I'm
but
sorry?
did Villaraigosa really run from his left as much as he ran from a position of not this the city's not functioning well. So I wonder if Nithya Raman should be and her people should be pulling out the Villaraigosa playbook and seeing what it was that he was able to do.
Well, he had a charisma. He had a, the one of Han was very smart. As silly as art, he's not dead. He's a very smart man, very smart policy wise, but he couldn't compete with Antonio Villaraigosa's spark. I mean, that's what it is in Los Angeles and California. We like glitz in our candidates. We do. I mean, look at Arnold Schwarzenegger in the 2003 recall. Gray Davis, poor guy, never had a chance.
Yeah, he didn't. Hey, I'm looking in the chat and I see Paul, your colleague at the Golden State Report, and someone who's written a lot of stuff I disagree with over the years, and a few things I agree with, but a great guy. He asks, were there any outtake out of state or local takes on the California or LA elections that stuck out to you as particularly good or bad? Can you help us wade through the sea of opinions on the vote count? Um, so I'm going to take a first stab because I'm sure it will annoy some of the people that follow. It was interesting watching the abrupt end to that interview with the President Trump over the weekend, and he was pretty vociferous that the late vote equates to fraud. Um, and I don't think that's a good take, but I also don't think the 2020 election was stolen, so I'm not necessarily the best judge. I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm saying that you kind of live in a place where there's proof. So I will give you this, Paul. I'll give you my take real quick, and then I'll send it over to Mariel. I do think we have a dysfunctional process in California, but I have a point of view that is very different from the majority party. I think that voting it's a right, but it's also a privilege, and you should have to some effort should have to go into voting. I am absolutely opposed to the idea of mailing out millions and millions and millions of live ballots to everybody and making it's kind of like, hey, you know what? I got to pay my water bill. I got to pay my credit card department store bill. I got to fill out my ballot. I feel like we've diminished voting to be something that's so routine that it's no longer feels like, I got to study the ballot and then I'm going to go down to my polling place and I'm going to vote. And attendant with having tens of millions of live ballots being sent all around the state of California is an invitation to accusations of voter fraud. And frankly, and Mariel and I talked about this earlier, if there was voter fraud, how would you even find it? Because again, is it voter fraud if my son who's 18 went to school and forgot to vote his ballot. He calls me on the phone and says, Dad, can you just fill that out and drop it in a box for me? And technically, under the law, I'm not allowed to do that without a signature. There's a bunch of stuff that has to happen. Maybe I can because I'm his dad, but that's the more innocent side. The more negative side is, I'm at post office, et cetera, and I look in the trash can, and you know, there's dozens of ballot people like they threw out all the other crap in their mailbox. If they don't want to vote, they just take that live ballot and they dump it in the trash. And so if somebody went into the trash and picked out all those ballots and opened them and mailed them in, there literally be no way to prove it. So, anyways, there you
Well,
go.
that's actually not true, and that is one of the reasons it.
Well, you'd have to look for it. You'd have to look for it.
No, no, no. One of the reasons it takes so long to count the ballots, the mail ballots, is because they are doing verification of signatures, and if it doesn't match, then they'll take it to another step and try to contact the voter. So that's not entirely true
Yeah, but
that it
that
can happen. But I'm gonna say that I don't necessarily disagree with you. The intentions about a decade ago, California started implementing all these pro voter accessibility. reforms, and they were well intended, and but some of them may have gone a little bit too far. And I agree, I think it's important to have a grace period, and you and I may disagree on that, but I think 7 days is probably excessive. It's like
Yeah.
if you can't get your ballot in on time,
Right. And
then
and I think in a,
maybe you shouldn't be voting.
yeah, in a minute we can
Maybe you
talk.
should press your vote.
And I've written about this, and we could talk about what's going on with the
Yeah.
Supreme Court that's going to come into this. Well, actually, I'm going to talk about it, and then what I want to do, if it's okay, is before we leave LA, I'd like to get. uh, I mean, you've kind of talked about why Democrats are more widely represented in the late vote, especially in a Democrat city like Los Angeles. But I think we need to spend a minute asking ourselves, why is so much of the late vote tilted towards Raman versus the mayor? But before we do that, I just wanted to say for those of you who haven't read about it or watched it, there's currently a case before the United States Supreme Court. Oral arguments were heard earlier in the year, and I listened to those oral arguments. And it seems pretty obvious to me that there's a very high likelihood that the Supreme Court is going to take an action that is going to fundamentally change the count in California. The current statutes on election call for voting to be on an election day. In fact, that may even be in the Constitution. I wasn't. I think it's statute, and the justices who are very kind of a textualist are kind of like, it doesn't say election month. This is a case coming out of Mississippi, where in Mississippi they allow you to mail your ballots in by election day, and I think the courts are going to rule that for federal elections, a ballot must be received by election day in order to be counted, and it must be counted on election day. And so I think that's going to create a kind of an interesting dynamic, because it's not really practical to separate the federal elections from all the other elections, because it would be extraordinarily burdensome and expensive to hold two separate sets of elections. So if you think about the implementation of that, it means that ballots have to be mailed in plenty of time, and I don't know how California is going to adjust to that. They may open up the voting another week earlier. They could do that. They certainly invest a lot of money into a reminder at T minus, 10 days. You got only a few more days to make sure you vote that ballot, or it may not be counted. I don't know what, but that's
I
coming.
think I think there are ways that you can get around that. You know, deadlines are deadlines. If you move a deadline up, people will meet it, and they might be
100%.
I don't
And I
think
think it will go to
that
how long the count goes after the
maybe
election.
I mean, I just practically speaking, like the idea that you have to count the polls don't close till 8, so you have 4 hours to I mean, I just
No,
don't
no,
know how
I think they would
practically
tell you.
you can accomplish that. We're talking a state. California is a state that has more voters than like
Well, and
entire
this is,
countries, you
and
know?
well, and I think part of it is that the law, as the federal law as written, if you interpret it as election day, was written for a process that assumed that the vast majority of people were going to their polling place, casting a ballot. And so the outliers were kind of those people that applied for an absentee ballot, received an absentee ballot, and maybe they were 5% of the vote. Well, in this system that we have now in California, it was never contemplated that virtually everybody, that 90% of people would be mailing in a ballot, which is a much different process. And so, and then I would add, by the way, there's a bunch of laws that have been written that I'm not a fan of, that make it virtually impossible to challenge. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been in the ROV. I've been in there when you're trying to see, okay, do the signatures match? And there's a computer that's going through a process, and it zips through the screen. And now there's a law that says you can't go, wait, that fourth one, I saw it and it didn't look like it matched. Can you go back? Well, I'm sorry. The law says you can watch and observe, but there's no ability to challenge signatures other than, it's a very
That's for
difficult.
watchers, not for poll workers.
Right. A poll
Yeah,
worker can actually. And
yeah.
so, you know, anyway, so I don't know. It could be that the Supreme Court could say, that, hey, look, California adopted a system of voting that doesn't allow for compliance. California needs to change its system, or federal law needs to change. Or no, if you can't count them that night, you've now got an intractable conflict, because nobody forced California to use a system that can't comply with federal law. I don't know where it goes. That starts to get into weird land. So
It
we're gonna
does. It
we're
does,
gonna see
and
what
we'll have to
happens.
deal with that when it happens, if
Yeah,
it happens.
John Fund writes. I don't know if you know John. John is a longtime Wall Street Journal reporter. Was writes now for a lot of publications. National Review. He says the LA County Registrar of Voters says its overall approach to ballot validity is liberally construed in favor of the voter. A very large number of ballots are therefore automatically approved in the 2024 presidential election. Only 20. I can't even read his whole comment. Only 21.3. I don't know if it comes up to you. I can't read it all.
No, no.
Anyway, I think that's the
I'm
case.
sure it's very smart and true.
I think the laws have been written to liberally construe permissiveness and
That
allow votes. So, well, let's pivot over. I was going to pivot to you. Why is so much of the late vote that is being counted in Los Angeles tilting towards Raman as opposed to Bass amongst the Democrats, in your
well,
opinion?
because I think that shows a very large dissatisfaction, with the way the city's leadership has been over the past 4 years. I don't
Yeah,
think there's any
but does that mean that the early voters were more satisfied and the late voters are more dissatisfied? Because Bass is
po
the number one vote getter.
I can't possibly know why. I mean, as I said, this is the same thing that happened in Nithya's race in 2020, in Eunici's. They tend to be more progressive. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I doubt that there is any sort of conspiracy. It's just
Right.
it's
I'm gonna throw out my working theory
okay.
just so
You
that
tell
we
me.
have it out there on the table, and I think there's a couple things. One, it'll be interesting to see how many of these late votes are younger people, because I do think that younger people skew more progressive, and only in the world of Los Angeles does a mayor who lamented the passing of Fidel Castro, not become the most liberal person running for office. But, um, I also think, and work with me here, I think that when we talk about people who normally voted early, because we have that information. We know when you voted. That's data that's available. People that normally voted early voting late, I think, are doing that because of the strategic voting aspect of Prop 14. And if you're
Mm.
if you're doing that, if you're saying I'm going to wait to cast my ballot because I'm unclear about who's going to be making the runoff and all that, well, wouldn't you be applying that same logic to the mayor's race? And you'd say, how do I cast my vote to make sure that Spencer Pratt guy is locked out? And so you're going to have a group of people that if they're already strategic voters and they're Democrats, who knows what they're doing in November? But the first thing they want to do is say, hey, look, if we can boost Ramen up in the end, right? Do you know who we don't have to
Yeah.
deal with? We don't have to deal with the Republicans. Anyway, that's just a theory. I don't know. It's as good as any. Like you said, we
It
can't know.
It's
All we
fine
can
it's
do is
fine with
guess.
fine could be. I'd love to talk about, some of the other races, though.
Yes.
I'm
Go ahead.
particularly interested in what you think about the congressional district number 6 up in Sacramento, where Kevin Kiley, former Republican, switched his party designation to none. He's an independent, and moved into that district, and now he's top vote getter. It looks like he's gonna go into the runoff, and against the Democrat, Dr. Richard Pan. Now, is that a strategy that
Well,
Republicans have to use to win elections these days? Is to switch
So
to
so it's very interesting, right? So again, I'm not a big fan of Prop 14, and this kind of thing. I happen to believe as a matter of of personal philosophy that in a general election, when most people are voting, every political party should have an opportunity to win an election. And I think in the primaries, like half the people vote, and so it's not really a good system. But that's another discussion we can have. In this particular instance, I spoke with Kylie. He made his decision to run as an independent the day that he filed, which was right basically at the end of the filing period. And I think he just decided that if he ran as an independent, it would be easier for him to get the votes of independents if he was not registered with a party, while still maintaining the ability to make the case to Republicans in a general election that, hey, look, your choice is me, who has been a Republican forever, and he can obviously make a case to Republican voters that he's voted. I mean, he's voted with the Republicans his entire time in Congress. But he does have a challenge because now, I don't know is to hear Paul Mitchell, again, the data guru who drew the districts, right, talk, he thinks that maybe it was purposeful, that the goal was to see if maybe he could get the most votes and the Republican, the one solitary unknown Republican, could come in second and block out the Democrats. I think that gives a little bit too much credit to Kevin's thought process. I think it was more simple than that, but it almost happened that way. But now, interestingly enough, I think Kevin's got an extra challenge, right? Because
Mhm.
the normal process would be you're the Republican, and now you got to go out and grab enough independents and a few Democrats, and maybe you win. Now, in the general election, Pan's going to consolidate all the Democrats, which is fairly easy because he's the only Democrat left. Whereas now,
Mhm.
Kevin Kiley has to convince a bunch of Republicans who did not vote for him that now in the runoff, they need to don't undervote, don't not vote, don't skip this election because there's no Republican on the ballot. Vote for me. So he's got to he has to campaign to the left and to the right in a general election, which I think is going to be very challenging. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But that there is no getting around the fact that the district that Kylie chose to run in carried for Kamala Harris by 10 points in the
Yeah.
last presidential election. So it's an uphill battle for him, but we knew that was going to be the case because his previous congressional district was split up into it was literally like
Yep.
destroyed and it was split up. As a matter of fact, there was a little drama right before the close of filing because there was some talk that Kylie might actually run against Tom McClintock, another Republican who's in one of the four remaining safe Republican seats in California. And we can have a separate conversation about whether or not how cool or not cool it is, depending on one's perspective, that Republicans got like 38% of the vote for president and are going to have 4 out of 52 House seats. But politics is what politics is. I understand why where we are what we are.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I do think that's an interesting outcome. Uh, we'll
But
see. We'll see.
ultimately ineffective, right?
Yeah, I don't. I think it's going to be very very hard for Kylie, and
Mhm.
it's an interesting phenomena because I would also say this. Um, I think a lot of Kevin's enjoying being independent. He's enjoying this moment. But I wonder what happens on the GOP internal financial side. Like, is the joke on everyone else, and everyone sees him as a Republican, and he'll have millions of dollars pouring out into that district to try to help him get elected? Or did he do it on his own, didn't talk to anyone, and everybody kind of looks at it and goes, well, with all due respect, how do we fund you, the guy who left the party,
Mhm.
before we fund other Republicans in other districts? So I don't know if he's a man without a country or if he's going to get funding. I suspect at the end of the day, you try to survey the race, and if Republicans see the path of electing Kylie as more reasonable than electing some other Republicans, I think they'll just go with him. I think the assumption is that if he were to win his election, he would caucus with the Republicans, especially if it gave the Republicans the speakership. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. So um, I have been told by the smart people that even though Tom Steyer, who spent a remarkable $200 million plus running for governor, his numbers keep closing. I have been told by the people who are smart about such things, I mentioned their names before, that
Right.
there's not enough runway left for him to close. Is that what you've heard?
Same. Yeah, it just does
Yeah.
not looking good for him. I guess it's still within the realm of mathematic possibility, but I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, it's kind of an odd thing. I think I think that so at the end of the day, I think that kind of there was and this kind of I think highlights the effectiveness of the effort. There was a real effort in the last month and especially in the last 2 weeks, to get Republicans to close ranks behind Hilton, arguing that Republicans could get locked out. And we saw in the final results, I mean, Bianco and Hilton used to be relatively tied in the numbers, and Hilton really moved ahead. And I think it's right, right? I think that clearly, if Bianco was sitting at 13 or 14%, Tom Steyer would be in the runoff with Becerra.
Ironic,
So
isn't it? All the worry was that the Democrats were gonna be shut out, and I don't even know how likely it was, considering that ran into a similar dynamic in 2018. But that was definitely the fear, and you know, all along it was more dangerous for Republicans.
Yeah. I should say this, by the way, to the people watching, because it could be that there'll be a show with Mariel and I where it's more like the gloves are off and we decide to talk about issues where we have some, and that might be fun because I think Mariel and I are both very respectful, thoughtful people. And so it would be fun to talk about the issues. But you've caught us on kind of election analysis mode talk.
Right.
So this is not like a dogfight. I mean, if you wanted to, Mariel and I could treat you to why who we voted for and why, which is a different discussion, but that I don't think is today's discussion. Today is really about kind of analyzing the race, what happened and why. Um, there was another interesting race that I'll bring up. Mary, I don't know if you tracked State Senate District 4 because there's not that much action that happens in safe Republican seats, but this one was interesting because this was a race where in 2022, this district that was a Trump plus almost 20 points, right?
Is it
It's
Orange County or Central
no,
Valley?
no. This district is like think kind of like gold country in the valley, in the
Okay.
Central Valley, coming down into the Modesto kind of area, right? And this is a district that, like I said, Trump won overwhelmingly. And then in 2022, when it was a new district, you saw two Democrats run and five Republicans, at least three of whom very well funded. And it was but the Republicans split up the vote, and the two Democrats advanced to the November election, ensuring that this very Trumpy district was going to be represented by a Democrat. The Democrat who won was a woman named Marie Alvarado Gill, and so she was elected. And then I'm going to say a year, maybe give or take, into her term, she changed to become a Republican. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of people around her, in whom I hold a lot of respect, believe that her change was heartfelt. And it's hard for me not to look at it as a kind of cynical because she knew that she was a one-term senator if she ran for reelection in that district as a Democrat. And I think what really happened is in order to try to be the kind of Democrat that maybe had a shot, she ended up voting against a lot of the traditional Democrat positions as a Democrat, and very quickly got kind of ostracized in her own caucus as, how could you vote for this and how could you vote for that? And then one thing leads to another. And so what was interesting is that Alexandra Duarte, who is the wife of a former one-term congressman in that area, who lost his seat to Adam Gray 2 years ago. She jumps into the race, and by the time the dust settles, Alvarado Gil could not make her case and lost her race, but it was like that narrow. And so it was just kind of interesting to me. A lot of money came from outside of the district for Alvarado Gil, Sacramento money, who I think that there's an appetite in the third
Sacramento
house.
money from whom exactly?
I think it was
That
coming
diff-
from a lot of the kind of the interest groups that are, I'd have to go back and look. There's like the traditional third house. It wasn't
okay.
conservatives. But it was. I think there's a hunger by a lot of the third house. And for those of you not schooled in this, the third house are like the interest groups, whether it's the
Lobby.
medical association, the insurance industry, frankly, unions. Unions are kind of third house. They're all these different interest groups that have an interest, corporations, and I think they would like to see more moderates in the legislature in both parties.
Yeah.
And so in their minds, they're like, here we have what is now what would amount to be a moderate. She was a moderate Democrat. Now she's a moderate Republican, and they would really wanted to invest in that, and didn't work out. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting because we don't see that many examples of the top two system really resulting in two candidates of the same party. We have that in one statewide race, don't we? Yeah, the insurance commissioner's race,
Right. Right.
right? Where there's two Democrats. All the other statewide races sorted where there's a Republican and a Democrat. And I know I've got a lot of Republicans watching this program. Don't get your hopes up. This is a very Democratic state. Um, and maybe this goes to my analysis of Hilton versus Becerra.
Yeah, let's
kind of
talk
look.
about that. Do you think he has a chance?
So I look at it this way, and maybe this is realistic, maybe it's not realistic, maybe the position is no matter what Becerra does, he's going to win. Uh, I think that there are millions of more Democrats than Republicans in California, and so in order for a Republican to win statewide, like Steve Hilton, a couple things need to happen. First of all, Hilton would have to do everything right. He can't stumble at all. He's got to run a textbook campaign. And more importantly, he's going to have to go out to a lot of major Republican donors aligned with the president around the country and basically meet with them and say, I want you to meet me. I want you to know me. I don't need you to give today because the election were held today. I'm going to lose. But I need you to have known me because if this guy Becerra takes a stumble, if he has something explosive happen, like what happened with Swalwell,
Mhm.
there's going to be a moment, but that moment may be late and there's no time for me to meet you later. But therein lies part two. Becerra would have to implode. Becerra would have to have an epic problem um, at almost Swalwell levels. And even then, like for example, the most obvious problem that Becerra could have is related to the federal investigation around his former chief of staff getting paid from his campaign funds that flowed to a nonprofit that then flowed to him that resulted in a federal investigation started by the Biden DOJ, concluded by the Trump DOJ that has now resulted in criminal convictions in plea agreements. And um, I don't think that even if they found out that there was enough to charge Becerra, I don't think that's enough because I think Becerra runs on of course, the Trump DOJ is charging me, right? And I think he still probably gets elected. I mean, I don't know what your
Agree.
thoughts are. I,
Yeah, I mean, I think Hilton is an interesting candidate, and there's definitely some similarities between Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? I mean, you can't escape them. Um, but uh, I think he would really have to. You're right. I think Becerra has to really mess up. This is his race to lose at this point. And Hilton would have to soften some of his positions, you know? I mean, he's not a moderate Republican.
no, not at
He's
all.
not
And
at
he and
all.
he's
And
and he owns the Trump endorsement. I mean,
exactly.
on election day, Donald Trump was on Truth Social saying, "I need Steve Hilton." Right. So you look at the Prop 50 playbook.
Mhm.
And you just think, why wouldn't you repeat that playbook in a general election? Because I do think that um, Hilton is a much more talented debater and public spokesperson than Becerra. So
Definitely.
I
Most of
was
the
on.
people on that stage, on the debate stage, were better. I mean, oh my gosh, I almost called Becerra Biden. And I don't, that's probably a Freudian slip because
Yeah, well, I think he's
he
going to pull a Biden. I wouldn't be surprised if he went very low profile in the general election. He just wants to be
yes.
the generic Democrat. I think you might see a couple of debates, and that would be it. I think there'll be kind of that one, kind of like Politico, LA Times, Chronicle, mainstream media, or some mainstream, and then I can't imagine that Alex over at CNN isn't going to drag these folks on for one debate. But frankly, if the first one goes south for Becerra, he may not do a second one, or it
He
could be
may
that
not.
the polls are so high that why not?
Well, he's
Uh,
unlikely to pull a Biden. I just think, and he's not at all he's a smart man. He's just very low profile. He's not, he doesn't have a lot of glitz. And
the, the, yeah,
so it would be unexciting. And I don't think he would lose points, and I don't think he would gain points
right.
in a
This
debate.
kind of this actually goes to one of my theories. We talked about why ramen over bass with the late votes, and part of my question was, I think when we look back at the 2020, 2026 gubernatorial race in California, the big question mark that will hang over it till the end of time is why did everything go to Becerra so quickly when Eric Swalwell flamed out? I mean, it was quick. It was almost like a collective mind shifted to him,
I
right?
have a theory if you want to hear it.
Well, you give your theory and then I'll give mine. Go ahead.
Okay, my theory, and I sort of preach shadow that already, is that he was the anti Swalwell. I mean, if you've just had exciting candidate flame out and you look at the rest of the field and you think, who is going to be the safe Democrat? Who is the safe Democrat here? The one who is who is likely to be able to appeal to the most Democrats, who's going to
Oh,
upset
couldn't
the
that have been
fewest amount of
Villaraigosa?
people. I'm sorry, what?
Couldn't that have been Villaraigosa or Matt Mahan?
No, I mean Matt Mann had. I mean, first of all, Villaraigosa was just doing poorly, and I think his time in the political spotlight had passed, and everyone saw it except for him. Mahan got into the lace rate, but um, he also had the backing of a lot of Silicon Valley billionaires and executives, and there was a certain amount of distaste about that within Democratic circles. And then you get to the Becerra, but also in terms of resume, he had the best resume of any
Right,
of those candidates. He had run a
right.
state department. He'd been elected California State Attorney General. He ran a federal agency. Was a congressman for many years.
Right.
So
So he's out of kind of central casting on the resume side. So my
exactly.
so
Exactly.
my
So
my
that's my theory. I don't think there's anything suspicious about it. It was like, uh-oh, who's next?
right. I agree with all of that. As a matter of fact, my theory is really, really close to yours. It may be the same theory, just stated slightly differently. And I will give a shout out to our friend Mae Reston, who, of course, she has her own Substack now, and she was with the Washington Post. I think she was part of the downsizing that occurred there. I think I haven't talked to her to find out if she was made to leave or if she left on her own, but she wrote a piece called basically comparing Becerra to a cardigan, right? That he was the comfortable sweater that could be put on. My theory is
Biden.
kind of right is kind of like the same, which is that I think that after not only do you have the tremendous flame out of Eric Swalwell, but for voters that every day first of all, have been used to the extraordinary behavior of Donald Trump in terms of how, hyperbolic he is, right? And then you're getting pelted with massive advertising from the equally hyperbolic Tom Steyer. All of a sudden, people aren't looking, I think Matt Mahan was more moderate both in ideology and temperament, but I think Becerra won the even temperament primary, as you would say. He was looked at as this person. I do a lot of cartoons, and one of my cartoons that I did was a family sitting on their couch looking at the TV screen, and there's Steyer and there's Becerra, and Steyer's like ah, and Becerra's like right, and somebody in the family is going, I like the calm guy. Right,
Yeah.
and I think that if you were gonna create an image, that was kind of it. I think he benefited from being the calm guy, so we'll see what happens. We're getting close to a time here. Why don't we eat you have one final topic maybe you'd like to hit in this particular chat?
I have a question for you, and that is, do you think the gambit of Democrats with Prop 50 has paid off or is going to pay off? What's your take on the results in those
Oh, and
redistricted seats?
well, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that it paid off because what it paid off, meaning more seats for Democrats. Because two things happen in there. Everyone likes to use the hard number, right? Which is California is going to go from 9 Republicans to 4 or 5. But what people are also forgetting is there were 5 or 6 other districts besides the 9 that were always competitive. Dave Min almost lost, and I could go around the state and point out another handful of districts where Republicans were close every time. And so, first thing that happened is all those shoulder districts got shored up. And so now you're really down to a question of we know for sure that there are going to be 4 Republicans in Congress, right? Because you've got the Bakersfield seat where Vince Fong is, you've got Tom McClintock in Gold Country, you've got Jay Obernolte up in the Big Bear High Desert area, and either Young Kim or Ken Calvert are going to be in Congress. And those are the 4 locked seats. And in theory, though, however, there are, I think, maybe 3 or 4 other shoulder seats, and so Republicans could go from 9 down to 7 or 6. There's a seat that is in San Diego County, where
Yeah.
Darrell Issa chose not to run. But it's not Darrell Issa's seat anymore, of course. It's more Democrat. And so that's a seat that Jim Desmond could win. Is he likely to win? We don't know. David Valadao in the Central Valley, his district is a few points more Democrat, not crazy more Democrat. And he's shown a lot of resilience there. And the Democrats had a big food fight on their side. And I think the more progressive candidate is currently ahead there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in there. And then the other three districts that at least if you look at the Cook report, which is a decent place to look, they think that Tran in Orange County has a tougher road. He's not safe. They think that Adam Gray versus Kevin Lincoln is not safe. And then they curiously have they don't, by the way, they don't have Kylie as being competitive. They have that as a safe Dem seat. The only other seat they have kind of in play is, and he's always kind of come up short, is God, what's his name? The Democrat from the Central Valley. Costa. They on paper Costa's seat is not as strong as it could be, and so they have him as a potential. But again, there's no way that Republicans are going to have 9. At the most, I think they could end up with 7, and it's more likely they end up with 6 or 5, plus all those other districts out of play. So I think that as a pure partisan maneuver, it will have ended up being very useful for the Democrats. Um, I think the president is trying his hardest to make sure that those seats aren't needed to win the majority in the House. He's extraordinarily unpopular right now. But if things tighten up, it is entirely possible that Newsom's Prop 50 was the difference maker in taking the majority in the House. And then there's an irony, which I'll end with relative to this analysis, which is that the minute that if Democrats take the House, which is expected, but if they do, there's an irony about the fact that suddenly Gavin Newsom, the former governor, will no longer be the highest profile Democrat from California, because that will very quickly move to Robert Garcia of Long Beach, who will become chairman of the House Oversight Committee. And his platform for 2 years to haul every single player in the Trump administration into oversight hearings is going to be, I mean, every day it's going to be crypto what and hotel deals what, and all that stuff's gonna it'll be interesting. Anyways, I think as we are closing in on almost an hour, because I think
Yep.
Mariel and I could do this for a long time. I wanted to thank everybody for being with us. We're gonna share this on both of our sites, and if people enjoy this content, first of all, you help us algorithmically. The few of you that are with us right now, if you hit the little heart button before we go, you can see it on there. If you hit the heart button, that helps this get spread around into the Substack universe a little bit. So we appreciate that. And then if you're watching it after the fact and you hit the like button, that also helps this to get shared around. And then any
Especially if it's
feedback
on
is welcome.
YouTube.
And if you're watching this, we'll both upload this to our YouTube channel. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you got to like it, you got to subscribe. I hate to sound like all those people that like and subscribe, but it matters. It gets the word out. So last word is yours, Mariel. What do you want to say in the close?
I want to say that I want to end with a little bit of a rant, if that's okay.
You got it.
So on Wednesday, the day after the election, I put in the recycling bin 3 pounds of political mailers. 3 pounds. I mean, it was unbelievable. I had pictures of the big stack. And I thought, "Phew, I won't be getting those for a while." The next day, I got in the mail a flyer for some from some group. I think it was some AstroTurf group about a bill. I won't get into the particulars about it. And I was so enraged. I thought, if this is the new tactic that I'm going to get, I'm going to get a mailer, not just for political candidates, but also for every bill that a special interest doesn't like. I'm going to lose my mind. So that's my rant.
Well, I will tell you this. If you want a solution to your problem, re-register Republican and move to a part of Orange County that doesn't have any competitive races, and you'll have a much different mailbox experience.
My
So
problem, I think, is that I'm nonpartisan, um, or no party designation, which means I get extra amounts of
you
political.
get everything. You
So
get
that
everything. And of course, you and I are people that hold on to our ballots a long time, ostensibly because we're just kind of trained to want to see all the stuff.
I
So
like
all
to
right.
vote on election day. You know,
Yeah, there you go. I wish more people were doing that. All right. Hey, thanks, Mariel, for coming. I mean, I don't know if this was your idea or my idea, but somehow this was a good idea, and I look
it
forward to
was.
doing this more in the future. So,
I would love to have a talk where we actually debate one particular issue, and maybe it's election counting and ballots and all of that.
well, we'll do that. Remember, it's never right versus left; it's right versus wrong. I say. So, all right. Thanks, everybody, and we'll get this online so you can share it with other people.
All
Appreciate it.
right. Thanks, Sean. Bye, everyone.